Hey, JC.
How's it going?
I'm doing all right. Looks like we're live.
We are live. Well, welcome to Call Me AI. It's a live video stream podcast. So that's a lot of things. And I welcome everyone in the audience to type in a lot of comments and tell us where you're typing from. Raj, thanks for coming on this journey. Most people have never done a live stream. And so, it will be recorded at the end for you to give out to other podcasters or keynotes that you want to speak on. So hopefully, I know you're already famous, but this will be another part of your journey to fame.
Funny.
I'll do a quick intro. So I'm Jay Z. I am an AI product and growth leader. Right now, I'm teaching actually a podcast class, teaching people how to use podcasting to do business development, sales, and grow their own businesses. So my link is scrolling on the bottom if anyone wants to start their own podcast and interview big clients every single week. Raj, I'll just turn it over to you for your intro.
Sure. I'm a EIR and head of Solo at Mozilla. Sure, most people are familiar with Mozilla, Firefox, claim to fame, but also all the great work that we've done in open source and now doing in responsible and ethical AI. I know we're going to dig into it, but Solo AI website builder, going to talk about that a bit. Project that started just in June timeframe and went live just a couple months ago.
Yeah, I was really excited to find out about this because, solopreneurs often need to test different versions of their website. And I love that you can just build it in Firefox. So why don't you start with a demo? Should I put your screen on?
Sure, give a quick demo. What we're looking at here is the Solo website. Actually, why are we there? Should go to the main website, not support. But it's at soloist.ai, so you can check it out. And the premise here was we saw the generative AI trend, and at the same time, the sort of just growth in sort of freelancers and solopreneurs, people wanting to be their own boss, starting their own businesses, and the need for just sort of having a web presence. Many of these solopreneurs have existing destinations, whether it be on Yelp or Facebook or whatnot, but they may not have a website. And it sounds so simple, yet, even in 2024, going into WordPress, going into Wix or others might feel cumbersome, depending on what path you take or how you configure it or whatnot. On top of the fact that there's just so many layers of different pricing that it can get really, really confusing. So we wanted to build something really, really simple, such that you can get up and going pretty much instantly. And generative AI obviously plays really well into this. So just to show you how simple it is, you just click build your website, and then you can type what your business is about. So maybe I'm a tennis coach or whatever it is, doesn't matter. And we are, I don't know, all stars. And you could put in a location if you want. It's all sort of optional. And if you have an existing presence, you can link that as well, and we'll actually try to pull from there. And then that's basically it. You can choose some styles if you like. Otherwise, we'll suggest some things for you, what you'd like to see on your site, and then Solo begins composing your website. And so then this process takes maybe 10 or 15 seconds. And what's happening here, it's actually using generative AI to sort of pull together content for the different sections of your site, and then pulling images from Unsplash that are curated to help generate sort of this first pass of your website. So here we have Unleash Your Tennis Potential, some services that we offer, a little gallery, and so forth. And from here, you can just further customize as you wish. So if you wanted to add custom images or upload your logo or connect Google Analytics or whatever it might be, you can do that. And so that's basically the high-level premise. I can actually publish this site. I have to sign in and then you're up and running. It'll be soloist.ai / whatever URL you want to give it. So that's kind of the quick rundown of Solo. Jump back here.
Wow, it's so fast. That's awesome.
Yeah, no. So I think a big part of the goal here was we wanted to make the experience super easy. So, be up and running instantly, just not really have to think about it. And there's a lot of folks who, these service providers, they really struggle at sort of writing this kind of content. Like they know they can do group tennis classes, but coming up with some sort of catchy phrase or sentence. And this is where I think generative AI plays really well. The other thing too is, setting up just a simple contact form, gallery, all these sorts of things. And so a large part of the goal was just to make this as simple as possible so you can be up and running with your website for your business immediately, so you can now focus on your business and not have to deal with managing your website. When we actually interviewed a number of service providers and solopreneurs, we actually found that many use paid like webmasters or web agencies because they just found the process all too difficult. And so that's why we tried, sort of internal goal just to make this experience as simple as possible.
That's amazing. I absolutely agree. I coach a lot of clients on building websites using AI, and they get really stuck on the language. So I love what you said about the AI giving you that first draft, avoiding that blank canvas that you're staring at and can't get over. And then a lot of them, they also publish because then they are like wordsmithing like 1,000 times before they actually publish. So I love how the AI gets you started.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think that's been one of the neat byproducts of just generative AI in general. It's created more equity in that where English might not be your first language or you just struggle at writing, it can be really, really helpful.
Awesome. Can you tell us more about Mozilla's innovation projects and what the org is doing around AI?
Sure. So there are a ton of different initiatives with respect to AI and Mozilla. Actually, they just put something out today on the Mozilla Distilled blog. So I just pulled this up so people can look at this offline if they like. But it's kind of going through a timeline of just the various AI and AI tangential efforts that have been spearheaded or launched or early and all in different sort of phases and stages just over the past year. I pulled out a few just to sort of highlight a couple different projects. So LlamaFile, for those listening who are trying to play with a lot of these different foundational models and want to run something locally on your machine, this was actually a project on Mozilla that's gained some steam, which basically lets you run these language models that you could download from Hugging Face or whatnot in a single file sort of executable. So you don't have to deal with opening up the terminal and running a bunch of commands, which can be a little bit complicated for a number of folks. And so you can basically wrap any large language model into just a single file executable. And there's a lot of work that's happening underneath to make that cross-platform so it works on Windows or Mac or Linux or whatnot, as well as it packages its own little web server. So it opens up the browser and then you can just immediately start asking questions of your large language model locally on your computer without having to have any concerns about data being sent to OpenAI or others. So this is a cool little project. We had published an AI guide, nothing too surprising here, just some content. FakeSpot was an acquisition that Mozilla had made last year, and they recently launched FakeSpot Chat. So this is like a real problem on the web now, obviously with the surge of bots and synthetic reviews, or just synthetic content in general. What can you trust? So this makes an attempt to try to identify what are real reviews, but also summarize those reviews from an authentic perspective when you're looking at products and shopping. Memory cache is an interesting project, particularly if you're interested in sort of like your browsing history. So this is another project that came out of Mozilla this past year, where we are, you basically can save out basically your browsing history gets saved locally on your computer, and then you can ask questions against your history, all local, completely sort of offline. So it's sort of like your browser memory now accessible through an LLM. So that's just a handful of projects. Obviously, we have work going on in all different places, whether it's on the policy side through the Mozilla Foundation, or whether it's through various products, as well as we have Mozilla.ai that's looking at responsible and ethical AI. So it's sort of range of different things. And of course, I showed you Solo earlier today with how we're using AI to help you generate your website.
Awesome. Michael Lewis says, looks like a great tool. Good use case for AI. I think he was referencing soloist.ai, which you presented in the beginning, Raj. So that's awesome, Michael. Any other questions, or like, what are you going to build your first website about? Michael, let us know more. Raj, getting back to the first thing you showed after Soloist, the first thing around the Mozilla portfolio.
Yeah.
So you're saying that, this is a one-stop shop for Hugging Face and Llama and some of the other models. Can you demonstrate what it would look like to use that?
I don't have I don't have a Llama file currently downloaded to my computer. It'll take a minute to download because the files are big, because you're downloading a foundational model as a single file executable. But basically, normally if you are trying to, you know what, we'll do this, trying to play with any of these sort of large language models, you're having to usually, like if you want to play with like Llama 2, for example, you have to download obviously have to download the model weights, whatnot, but then you have to run a bunch of like local script commands to then get like some kind of interface. So with Llama file, it's just a single file executable. You can just sort of download and get going. And we are seeing an increasing number of models using wrapping their large language model in Llama file, so they can just make it available for people to play with.
Yeah, I had a guest on my podcast, Taha from Eden AI. So he is the one-stop shop where you can put in a prompt, and then 10 different models will give you a response. So I think it's a really good way for founders to test different models and figure out which one you're going to pay for. I think this use case is a little different, right? You're just saying this is an easier way to execute one model.
Yes, this is very much focused around like just a single file, double click it on your computer, and it just sort of runs. So it's really catered towards folks who maybe aren't as tech savvy and don't want to deal with GitHub and maybe cloning a repo or whatever might be required to sort of run that model, as well as dealing with like, is CUDA accelerate, like is GPU acceleration working on my machine and things like that, like depending on what platform you're using. So Llama file is a good way to circumvent that. I encourage people to come check it out offline, and you can get started. I would show it to you, but I don't have a Llama file currently on my computer, and I don't want to wait to download 4 gigs to show you an example.
Oh yeah, my last podcast, my internet was trying to upload 70 gigs, and so that was not fun. Did not work out very well. So we'll definitely leave that for another time. But let's see. Gregory Gorman is saying, hey, Raj, just came in late. And Kevin Chen is saying, very cool, useful application, Raj. So people are loving it.
Cool.
So Michael, Gregory, Kevin, ask your questions, and Raj will have the answers, and comment them into the chat. So as we're waiting for you all to comment your questions, Raj, I'll keep going with our agenda. Tell us about solopreneur pain points. Why solo now?
Yeah, so this was sort of the graph that really kind of stood out to me, which is just, And I think this is a macro trend. People want to be their own boss. People want to do people. People are doing side hustles. People are freelancing, and you're just seeing this like everywhere. Whether it's hobby work, whether it's freelance work, people like control of their time. I think some of this is just sort of post COVID, and we are seeing a little bit of a surge. And so, if you look at this trend and then sort of generative AI, it just created this really neat inflection point of like, hey, here's a good example of where we could use generative AI to help freelancers grow their business. And interestingly, you know, we interviewed a number of service providers, and many of them would often hire somebody to help build this, but then it would be difficult to manage. Often their first presence might be their Instagram or their Facebook or a Yelp page or a Google Places page. But then at some point when they want to grow the business, they want to set up some sort of web presence. And that's where we felt Solo could meet their needs. So that's kind of how we triangulated on this. And we're kind of writing two macro trends here, which is the growth of generative AI, and then just sort of this sort of freelance economy.
That's a great point, that people start with a platform like Yelp, and then at that, there's a moment where they've gotten enough leads or they can't get any more leads. And so is that the moment that they start building a website to drive traffic to?
Yeah, we found most started looking at a web presence when they were ready to grow their business. So maybe they tested an idea or trialed something or whatever through a Facebook group or a Discord, whatever it is, and they're getting some traffic or some audience. But now they're like, I want to grow my business. I want to make it bigger. So they need some space that they truly own, and a website is a good place to do that. So nothing too original here, obviously, but surprisingly, websites are actually a great place for intersecting with generative AI, and so that's sort of how we arrived with Solo.
Yeah, so I really like that, because I really recommend people to test their ideas on existing platforms to see if you get enough of a community, if you're helping people, if they're helping you, before you build a website, right? Because a website on its own, you have to drive traffic to it. There's no platform like giving you viewers and followers. So once you have that on a different platform, I think it's great to grow with a website. And I'm wondering, Raj, do you have any examples of users you've helped who've made that transition from Yelp to Solo, and then like any case studies of how their business has grown as a result?
So we just made Solo live in middle of December, and it is like it's still in beta, so it is an early incarnation of the experience. But we have seen a little over 5,000 websites that have been created on Solo since then, and that's obviously growing. And I think a little over 2,000 or 3,000 of them have been published, which is pretty amazing. We are seeing, just through our normal analytics, traffic sort of growing. So I think that's people using their sites created through Solo to sort of advertise their business. But of course, the next step here, once you've set up your web presence, is I want to grow my business now. And so we've been thinking internally about how we can help with that. And one of the neat things, which is sort of Mozilla, is all our sort of different touch points with the internet and the web, and even through advertising and sort of Mozilla's own sort of ad network, and ways we could possibly help businesses that build on Solo.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or is that top secret still?
Oh, there's nothing top secret about it. It's just sort of early. So these are just things that we're exploring. But Mozilla, for example, we have ads that we show when you open up the new tab in the Firefox browser or within the Pocket experience within Firefox. And so those are all different sort of touch points where maybe we could also help promote businesses that have been built on Solo.
So as a solopreneur, I could sell ad space on my Soloist website?
You could, well, again, so these are just ideas that we're exploring, so probably too early, but you could conceivably have your Solo business site be promoted from other Mozilla properties.
Oh, so I could buy ad space on other Mozilla properties.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, these are just very early.
Got it. Yeah, that's really interesting. Any questions in the audience, please comment them. We're going to move on to, what did your team learn in building Solo from an AI perspective?
Yeah, so we shared some of this earlier in the sort of, we have a Mozilla AI Discord group, which I could send the link to offline for those that are interested. But there's been a range of different things that we learned. And I think like others who might be listening or may listen to this in the future, or who've just been dabbling with generative AI, which I think most people have really only dabbled, but maybe not have gone necessarily deep, have encountered some of these different sort of pain points. So I do have some slides here. I can actually go through some of the things that we found in our journey, and we're still learning and we're still updating our sort of resetting expectations and relearning and updating and so forth. But we, like everyone, just kind of started with like, okay, what if we asked ChatGPT to build us a website, build us content for a website? And we found, obviously, some challenges around content starting to sound monotonous. Sometimes it was inconsistent. When you access these large language models through an API, there's a temperature setting, which is basically a way to indicate how creative you want that output to be. So that's something we played with it for a while, but we couldn't really find any sort of definitive patterns around different sort of temperature settings. It's a lot of work to actually then go and instrument to see if like, is this output actually more creative or less creative in a programmatic kind of way, if you're looking at like thousands and thousands of results, and we don't have those sorts of resources. And so we kind of fixed that at 0.7, I think it says in the slide. We also tested whether using ChatGPT for picking things like color schemes and font patterns, how well it worked there. We didn't find it to work too well when it came to those sorts of things. And I think that's in some ways it's because it's an average of the internet. And so it tends to pick some of the most popular colors that you would find, as well as fonts. And we wanted to be more creative. So that's an area where we actually ultimately curated our palettes and fonts. But I think this is something we continue to retest as these things get smarter. The other thing, I didn't really demo this, but you can actually, when you build your Solo site, you can start with your existing presence. So if you have a Yelp page or a Thumbtack page or whatnot, and you can actually provide that URL, and we'll pull content from there. So the generated or composed website is more true to your brand. Scraping in general, I think, just remains a hard sort of problem. Obviously there's like the Bing search APIs, and you can use that. And so we actually tested a range of them, but how do you get it to work quickly? How do you get an output that's clean? And so this was just an area that we had to spend some time. And I don't think this problem necessarily has gone away. I think all of the all of the sort of chat interfaces into large language models on the web today, whether ChatGPT or whether Copilot or whatnot, even Perplexity, they're all running web search, and so they're dealing with some of this as well. But this obviously was a little bit of a challenge, and we don't think the solution we have is perfect, but it's doing okay. The other thing was getting structured output. So we started this in June of last year. This has gotten a lot better. But if you want to use, obviously, generative AI in a programmatic kind of way, you want to make sure that the responses are in some sort of structure, such that you can then manipulate it. And this was a challenge earlier on. I think this has all sort of been solved now through the APIs. Most of these comments here are in the context of OpenAI, which is what we have built this on. Not safe for work content. Interestingly, we have found the models have substantially improved here, and I know a lot of them are guardrail training on a range of different sort of public data sets with this sort of intent. But there's probably more work we could do here, so it's kind of another interesting thing. And then actually even choosing the images, we search Unsplash, but we wanted to generate the keywords to search Unsplash with from the large language model itself. So we actually take the generated content. So it's almost like a workflow. And then we ask it like, okay, how would you then summarize it, or like what keywords would best represent an image for this content? And then we use those keywords, and then we shoot a query over to Unsplash, and then we then kind of randomly pick. And there's a little bit more logic around that, just how to sort of choose better images. But we did play with generative images, Midjourney, Dolly. We looked at others, but again, that's still a little bit too slow to use in a programmatic way. But this is something we're continuing to explore. Yeah, and then there's some other things we did around analytics. I'm sure there's a lot of tools out there. We use something called Reconify, but this is basically just to sort of track prompts and tokens to kind of estimate cost, response times, things like that. Very useful for debugging if we're getting occasional blank replies. But yeah, I mean, I think that's at a high level, these are all sorts of different challenges that we dealt with respect to generative AI in sort of the development of Solo.
Wow, there's a lot that goes into it, right? Because we don't see the things that you didn't launch, but you and your team had to test them all and come back with the recommendation. So there's a lot of effort.
Yeah, I think there's a number of. It became almost trendy to sort of launch on GitHub, and so there's a number of like, check out this cool. I don't want to use the word wrapper, but let's just quickly get something spun up with OpenAI and spit it out there. But then it's a whole nother thing, like to do the last 20%, where it actually is like indexable by Google, can be published, provides WYSIWYG editing tools, you can personalize it to your brand and so forth. And so a lot of those things, there is work going on behind the scenes. And even though we generated that site at the beginning in, 10 seconds or so, we'd like to get that down to like a second. So we're also looking at ways we can speed this thing up.
I have so many questions. So going back to what you said about the average of the internet in terms of colors, right? You want to have a palette that's unique, not just the blues that dominate the black and white internet. So when I think about art and design, it's about curation, but AI is about the average of the internet. So do you see any ways to solve that where, we could raise our hands for what we want instead of just taking the average that the AI gives to us?
So most of these models do have a temperature setting, so you can choose sort of what, let's call it in simplistic terms, like what level of out of median choices it should make when sort of predicting the next word or next phrase. And so that's something where you can play with it and you might get more variety. That being said, there is some reasoning to figure out like, okay, if I use this as my primary color, what should the rest of the color palette look like? Obviously, I could choose something more random here, and then I could pair it with something else more random, but together they don't work very well. And so this is something, it's just an interesting way to sort of benchmark. You can kind of ask these models over time and just see like how it does in terms of generating palettes with primary and secondary colors and whatnot. Interestingly, we found in our testing and prompting around this that if we had restricted it to just sort of Tailwind colors or like Bootstrap colors, if we use one of the frameworks, you get much better results. And I think that's because it's being constrained. But obviously, we'll probably get to a point where you don't have to. You just type what you want. You just have the whole site exactly the way you like, and we're not there yet. But I'm sure that we'll get there.
Yeah, the reason I found Soloist is because I do a lot of migration, right? So clients have existing websites they want to rebuild into AI so that they can edit it themselves, but also test like A, B, and C versions. So when I search ChatGPT, what are website builders that allow you to import a link and then generate a version of the old link. I got a lot of marketing, like, Webflow might do this in the future, but ChatGPT recommended as, a current launch. And so I'm always trying to figure out a prompt where I get the right information that's not marketing and I get the innovation, like the thing that I hadn't thought about. And so that's very rare where ChatGPT gives you the innovation that no human has even thought about.
Importing content is, I think, is going to remain a challenge. There's a lot of efforts now to sort of block user agents. The type of content that some of these service providers are using in their existing presence, whether it be Yelp or some other social network, are often behind an authenticated login. So that makes it also difficult. And in some ways, there's like a little bit of war between bots and scrapers and all of this sort of going on. And so, but it is a real issue where I'm a mural painter and I want to set up a web presence and my portfolio is on Instagram. And it's a lot of work actually getting those images back out.
So much work.
Yeah, right. And to create all of that. And you can, of course, go and do that manually, but it takes a lot of time and there's a lot of friction. And you kind of want to focus on your business. You don't want to focus on having to construct all of that. And so that's sort of the dream or the vision, like get to a point where it really can represent your brand and your business near instantly. And then from there, you can then focus on your business and let us do work behind the scenes to help drive your business.
Yeah. So the scraping part is the other question that I was going to ask. Midjourney with Google scraped all the images. And now, a lot of artists didn't know that their work could be incorporated into Midjourney, but alas, it is. And so how were they, like Midjourney and Google, able to scrape versus like us, finding it impossible to scrape?
So I don't know, I don't think it's public information, like what the exact data sets that they all used in training some of those models. I think some of those data sets are publicly licensable data sets. And I'm sure some of the data that was used in the training of those generative image models are in copyright contention. But I think I don't think they've necessarily trained on all those images behind authenticated logins or whatnot. I know Facebook, for example, their image generator, they had said that they trained on 1.1 billion images that had been uploaded. I don't know if they used rules around that and looked at images that were like publicly shared or whatnot. I'm not sure, but there's enough content just on the public web that you may not need to go into Google Photos to start to accomplish the level of training you need. And I think we're getting to a point where these models are not only training on the image, but these multimodal language models, large language models, are training on the surrounding text. And so the surrounding text tells you more about the image than maybe the image itself. And so it's getting to a point where it can maybe you can get, it doesn't even need an image at a certain point. Just description of these images might be sufficient at some point. And so I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I know there's efforts around training with video, obviously expensive, but video has so much more bandwidth. So there's a lot more to learn than from text. And so I think it's just exciting times, and it's neat to see all of this play a role in a variety of consumer and enterprise applications. Obviously, we're attacking one little sliver of it with Solo, but Mozilla doing stuff in a variety of different areas. But just industry-wide, it's been exciting to see.
Yeah, it's a great time to be building in the AI Wild West. Well, then I think I'm going to ask the last question. So all of you in the audience who are afraid to ask or think you're going to ask later, this is the time. So the last question is, tell us about these bots, fighting each other and scraping data and moving data. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure anybody on any social network today has seen an increasing number of bot profiles, whether on X or Instagram or even LinkedIn. And the cost of creating content is near zero now. And so there are a lot of concerns around the quality of the internet. We're seeing Google search results being impacted by this, where synthetic content might be ranking higher in some instances and not realizing it. So you're getting just this flood of content being created everywhere. You're seeing blog articles sometimes now being author caption saying created with assistance of AI or something of that nature. So this trend is hit everywhere, and it's in everything is double edged. So certainly it's an incredible enabler, but at the same time it means it's become more difficult to find let's say authentic voices or unique viewpoints that are not sort of getting drowned out. And so I do think it'd be interesting to see how all of this sort of plays out. I don't know what the solution is. Most of the systems to date, you can look at like what is it, Reality Defender? I forget, but like companies trying to figure out if it's a deep fake or figure out if it's synthetic content or mixed in terms of their accuracy, which makes sense because of the very nature of this problem. And so it's unclear, but we are seeing. I saw a Chrome had something out of the labs recently where they have effectively autofill for every input field on the web. Again, another very double-edged feature. Imagine writing a review for a product and you just write a few words and it generates the review for you. So I think we're going to see how this all plays out. I think it's interesting times, but it's certainly very disruptive, and we should expect that the future of the browser and just sort of this future of this whole sort of experience will change.
Yeah, it's exciting times. You're right. Real versus fake. I'm teaching AI design thinking. And so I want my students to use AI in their discovery processes, but I'm also using Turnitin to make sure that they're not only using AI and they also add their own edits and their own voice. So I think the tension between AI and that authentic voice hopefully will drive more authentic voices, not less. We will see.
Yeah. No, I'm a big believer that it's a productivity accelerant when used as a tool to augment sort of your existing workflows.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to close out. So how can we help you?
If folks have any feedback on Solo or whatnot, feel free to ping me offline. We're continuing to build that out. If folks are interested in open source and AI, as mentioned, there's a variety of initiatives at Mozilla that we're dabbling in and playing with. If curious to learn more, we're growing our teams as well, and I think just a exciting time to be at sort of the center of the internet with Mozilla and Firefox and whatnot. And so it's feel free to ping if you want to chat further.
Awesome. Well, Raj, thank you so much for coming on callmejz.ai.
All right. Thank you, JZ, for hosting.
I'm going to end the live stream for all the public guests, but you and I can stay on just to talk about a short clip and any roles you might want to post. So bye, everyone.